Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Also, quick thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet $50 on any game. Get up to $1,111 in free bets courtesy of the Betfred Sportsbook. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I want to continue the conversation about the biggest story in college football right now, and that is the conversation around Colorado, which in week one, game one, big noon kickoff, stunned TCU 45-42. Although I wasn't stunned. I thought they could win outright. They do. I bring it up because we just did the recap here on this YouTube channel. If you missed it, go back and check it out. I talked about the game. I talked about Travis Hunter. I talked about Deion Sanders. I talked about why I believe that this was a team that could overachieve this year, even if I didn't necessarily think it was for sure that they were going to win on Saturday. But what I didn't talk about was a lot of the reaction to after the game. When you get this big win, you're Colorado, this program-defining win, Deion Sanders becomes a household name, Travis Hunter becomes a household name. You knew of them, but if you didn't watch them at Jackson State, you get to see them in person. I bring it up because we all watched the game, but what was maybe just as interesting is that afterwards, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, went to the podium and basically just started calling out everybody in the media. And so it's been a big story since the game ended. It's been a big conversation, and I want to get into some of what Coach Prime said. But before I do, let me start by saying this. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to bury the lead. I am in the media. I am a trained media person. I'm one of the few people in the media that actually went to school for journalism. And what I am here to say, I have zero fundamental issue with what Coach Prime did. I have no problem at all with him calling out reporters who question him and his team. In a lot of ways, I kind of loved it. Now, let's get into what Coach Prime said. He just said a few things. The headlines, of course, because it's Coach Prime, are going to make it sound bigger than it actually was. But he basically kind of said a couple different things following the game. Again, a game that I think a lot of people were stunned by the result. 45-42 was the final score. Colorado was a 20.5-point underdog. Now, bluntly, as I said in the previous kind of reaction video, I wasn't surprised. I picked Colorado to cover. I thought they could win. And frankly, I didn't understand this idea of why they had to be terrible this year, right? Last year, LSU flips it in an offseason thanks to the transfer portal, wins 10 games under Brian Kelly. USC is playing for a Pac-12 title, year one under Lincoln Riley. Sonny Dykes, TCU, they're playing for a national title. So I didn't understand this idea of why Colorado had no chance of being good this year, but we already talked about that. With that said, though, I was in the minority because most people did not believe that this could actually happen. And so Coach Prime went to the podium, had a few different things to say. We don't have the video or audio available. We're getting a full-time producer, by the way. We'll have it available here in the coming weeks. But I'm just going to read you some of the stuff he said. One, there was the part where he basically said to everybody, I have receipts. I know what y'all said, and I'm coming back at you. Two, this was a directed quote at a directed reporter, where he said, I read through the bull junk you wrote. I read through that. I sifted through all that, responding to a reporter's question. When Sanders, when the reporter did not respond to Sanders, he said, you don't believe it. You just answered it. You don't believe it. Next question. And then finally, Coach Prime kind of spoke up for his son, right? We all remember that opening press conference where he's introduced. He said, that's Shedeur. That's my son. That's your starting quarterback. And I think a lot of people, not me, I know Shedeur's background. I know he was offered by Alabama, Georgia, and others coming out of high school. Well, a lot of people seemed uncomfortable with Shedeur just being handled the job. Well, when you throw for over 500 yards in your debut at the FBS level, maybe people need to do their homework a little bit more. So Coach Prime responded to that as well, saying, Deion Sanders from the HBCU, he said, smiling, the one that played at Jackson State last year, the one that you asked me why I'd give him the starting job, wasn't that you? So a lot of, I guess you could say, contention, but I have no problem with it. And I want to explain why. First off, one, I'm in the media, okay? I have been cursed out by coaches, but I have never understood the concept of the media that the media can just write, whatever they want, without there being any repercussions and without the athlete or the coach or the general manager or the owner being able to defend themselves. Never understood that. Never understood why that's okay. And actually, it's the exact opposite. When I was in school, and I'm an old man now, but I went to school for journalism. And back in those days, even before I got into the business, for the most part, people that were allowed to cover teams and allowed to have an opinion on teams were people that were generally around the program or the school or the organization or whatever every day. So if you had a strong opinion, you could write it, or you could go on radio, or you could go on TV, but you had to go to the locker room the next day to be accountable for what you said or what you wrote. And there was a lot of contention in those locker rooms back in the 70s, 80s, early 90s. I mean, think about Coach Prime. Think about when he was a baseball player, Atlanta Braves. Tim McCarver says something. Tim McCarver's in the locker room doing a post-game interview. Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, grabs a bucket of water and throws it on him. Was it Deion's best moment? Probably not. But he was frustrated, and he had that moment to defend himself after what Tim McCarver said. And so I'm not saying throw buckets of water, but I am saying you are perfectly allowed to defend yourself if something that someone says you disagree with. The great part about the internet right now, the way that it is it does give a platform to a lot of people. But it doesn't mean that if a person puts their opinion out there, they don't have to be held accountable for it. And so I understand Coach Prime's frustration, and I'll take it a step further. If people didn't do their homework, shame on them. Because what did I just say? Like, I saw this the other day, and it was driving me crazy. I saw people like, this is the biggest college football upset since Appalachian State over Michigan. I'm like, stop. What are you even talking about? Stop comparing a Colorado team who has a quarterback that was offered by Alabama, a former #1 high school player in America in Travis Hunter, Dylan Edwards, who flipped from Notre Dame. Those were the 3 stars of that game. Stop comparing that team to FCS teams. You're an idiot and you sound stupid if you do that. And so, yes, if people were uneducated, if people put out opinions without facts, if people said that Shedeur shouldn't be handed the starting job because he was the coach's son, just go look. I've said it a million times this offseason. Shedeur completed 70% of his passes, 40 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year. You do that at any level, you know what you're doing. Is it going to be a step up? Maybe. Didn't really look that hard to Shedeur. But at the same time, the bottom line is all the information was out there. And the idea that Shedeur was somehow not qualified or that Colorado couldn't compete, I never understood it. 2, what I would also say is, as far as, the reaction to it, this is what we want from our athletes and our coaches, right? We always say, oh, we wish the athletes said more. We wish they were more interesting. We wish they did this. We wish they did that. Well, generally, they don't say anything because every time they do, they get criticized. I'll give you a perfect example. And I tweeted about this the other day at Aaron_Torres. I was fired up about it. Joe Montana put out a quote. He was doing an interview and he said, Dan Marino is the best quarterback I've ever seen. And in this era, Dan Marino would kill it. Okay. Seems like an innocuous quote. I see all these people, including this social media account that has like 500,000 followers. Joe Montana takes back calling Tom Brady the GOAT and says Dan Marino is the GOAT. What? That's not what Joe Montana said at all. He didn't mention Tom Brady. He didn't say the GOAT. He said he thought Dan Marino was the best and most talented quarterback that he's ever seen. And so I bring it up because you'll wonder why these athletes don't want to do interviews. It's because we criticize everything that they say, and then we pick apart their words and make stuff up. And so from Coach Prime's perspective, I want him to keep talking, but I want him to be able to defend himself as well. And so I have no problem with it. And this is who he is, and this is what you signed up for. He mentioned it in the press conference. Said, this is how we've always been running our program. I'm always 100% transparent. You just haven't been paying attention. And it's true. This is what makes him him. This is what makes Coach Prime, is the fact that we are talking about a guy that always says exactly what is on his mind all the time and is unapologetic about it. Think about that opening press conference that he had, or the opening meeting he had, with that team, where he said, I'm bringing my own luggage and it's Louis. People got mad, but that is just Coach Prime being transparent and honest and real. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. But he's going to do it his way. He's going to keep coming after you. I'm not saying, by the way, If Colorado goes out and loses 40-0 to Nebraska next week, which they're not going to, but if they do, that's not to say you can only write rainbows and sunshine. You can be critical, but be ready for a response and make sure you have your facts straight. And then finally, I would just say, like, part of this too, listening to some of the quotes, Deion Sanders is his son. You know what Coach Prime sounded like to me? He sounded like a defensive father. He sounded like a father that's going to have his kids back no matter what. And obviously it goes without saying, 85 kids, they're all his sons, but I know he has a different relationship with Shedeur and Shiloh, his birth sons, his actual blood, who he's coached since they were little kids. So I give Coach Prime credit. I appreciate the fact that he stays true to who he is. No problem with what he did at all. I give him credit. And I loved that he was so defensive of his guys. And I have no problem. And if you're in the media, make sure you keep your facts straight, because Coach Prime's going to check you at the